Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. I'm Caroline Chan, and I'm a rising senior in high school. Today, I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with Mr. Jeff Grimes, the head of live events product at Perplexity. I hope you all enjoy our conversation. Hi, Mr. Grimes. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it. And before we get into the topic of AI and other stuff, I wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. So, I was wondering what kind of sparked your interest in technology and entrepreneurship, and did you know if this is what you wanted to do when you were attending high school at Crystal?
I did have a pretty good sense of that while I was at Crystal, and my interest in those areas goes back to even before Crystal. I was at Crystal for 7 years, but even as early as elementary school, my dad had gotten me into technology. I think he was an electrical engineer in college. Since then, has worked with a lot of tech companies and has long been a tech enthusiast, early adopter of all sorts of gadgets and software. Introduced me to, I think it goes back to video games when I was very young, even too young to remember. I think that's how a lot of people get into software. Although now it's so much easier when agents can code for you. But I remember playing video games with my dad, literally as young as I can remember. And I think it's pretty natural to try to figure out how those games are made. So even in elementary school, I learned basic programming. I think I was in fourth grade. He got me into it. It was the basic language, and it was I was doing really simple things, but I enjoyed it, and I continued doing that as a hobby, and it tended to focus on game development. There was a group of friends that I knew from growing up who had gotten into things the same way. We grew up playing video games together in elementary school and wanted to make our own games. So we would make Xbox Live indie arcade games.
Oh, wow.
They were actually more into it than I was. I would only help a little bit. But some of those guys that I'm actually still friends with today, they must have made a dozen of those little games. I don't think Xbox has this anymore, but they had a community, they called it the Xbox Live Indie Arcade Marketplace, I think. And it was where users could post their own little games, and you could have a free trial and then pay 80 Microsoft points, which was I think a couple dollars, I don't remember, to download it. And they made actually a good amount of money doing that. So that was how I first got into tech, in the sense of how I currently work in tech. And then the business side of things and a deeper journey into technology for me came in seventh grade, I think, was when this started. It was when I started a business. I grew up in Hillsborough, same city that Crystal's in. And Little League Baseball was and probably still is a pretty big part of the city. A lot of the kids go through Little League Baseball. I had gone through whatever it was, 6 or 7 years, the full start to finish from T-ball to the major leagues, and I thought it would be cool if people could have pictures of themselves, or parents could have pictures of their kids, and there were no photographers as part of Hillsborough Little League. So I had been interested in photography, and I gave a presentation to the Hillsborough Little League Board of Directors, I think it was called. I don't remember what the group was called. I went to the office down at District Field and asked if I could become the official photographer of the league and sell the pictures to the parents. And they said yes. And so I was given access, or I was given permission to go on the field, not in the field of play, but basically between the fence and the foul line, that grass, that little sliver of grass. So I was allowed to stand there and take pictures um, on both sides for right-handed, left-handed batters. And I would get pictures of the fielders from behind the fence at home plate or other areas. And the first year was a trial run of sorts, but people responded pretty well to it. The parents were pretty interested in buying the pictures. And I originally just sold them out of a binder. I would come to the next game and sell them physical copies out of a binder that I printed out. But then my dad encouraged me to put them on a website. So I learned a little HTML and JavaScript, and I dropped in the PayPal shopping cart. So parents could browse the pictures and order. I think I had something like 15 different products. They could order prints, mugs, mouse pads, framed photos. They could order the digital files on a CD, keychains. I forget all the different products I had, but they could order things there. And the PayPal widget would come up, the JavaScript. I remember this is probably like 5 seconds to do now, but it took me so long to get this all to work. It took me weeks, if not months, but it all worked. And they could check out and put in their credit card and pay for it. And then I would print the photos or print the products through another service and send it to them. So I did that for, what would that be, 6 years? Yeah, about 6 years till I graduated from Crystal. And it grew pretty well. I think by the end, I was taking something like 25 to 30,000 pictures a year.
God, wow.
Um, and as part of my bid to get approval from Hillsborough Little League, I think I need to go get reapproved. I committed to going to at least one game for every team in Hillsborough Little League. And there were probably maybe not 100 teams, maybe 70 teams, 75 teams, something like that. So
Time to
going to a,
that. Like,
what was that?
how many hours a week did you spend doing that?
A lot, quite a lot. It's one, at least one game per team, and I would stay pretty much the whole game. So that could be 2 hours.
Wow.
And that probably came out to between getting myself to the game, being at the game, taking pictures. The longest part was actually editing the pictures, which again now is probably entirely automated, but I would crop every picture by hand so it would actually look good as a picture and not just be too wide and unzoomed. Between all of that, I probably spent, I'd say, well over 14 or 15 hours a week, maybe sometimes more. Maybe often 20 hours a week at peak doing this. A lot of it was on weekends, so I didn't eat too much into my school nights, but it was a lot. It was a lot of work. It was seasonal. It's limited to just a certain part of the year. But anyway, I was taking, yeah, something 25, 30,000 photos a year. I think by the time I graduated from Crystal, the gross was about $10,000 in revenue.
Wow.
Obviously there's expenses, but it was something I grew to love, actually. I can't say that I loved cropping the pictures. I actually hated that part. That was extremely annoying. Everything else I really enjoyed. I enjoyed making a spreadsheet to understand my margins and how could I do marketing initiatives if I was going to be traveling with my family or something, or had a lot of schoolwork. I could hire people to take pictures for me. So I got some of my friends to do it. I trained them how to use the digital camera. I had a Nikon D70S, and I loved all those parts of it. I loved actually taking pictures. I've always liked baseball. I
That's,
played baseball, and I learned all the basics of business, really,
wow,
and
that's
then got a deeper experience with programming. I'd say in a way that felt much larger scale and making games.
yeah.
So that was what started it all,
Mhm.
was originally video games, and then this business, grimesphotos.com was what it was called.
Huh.
And
This, like, could I look it up or is it gone?
no, the website does not exist anymore. I actually sold it to my friend's little brother when I graduated from Crystal, and he ran the business for another couple years until he went to college, and then it didn't continue after that.
That's
But
cool.
that all led into my the majors that I chose for myself in college.
So you basically kind of maybe like had an indirect idea of what you really wanted to do with your life since when you were young and like making those video games. And is that right?
Yeah, I never really remember consciously thinking about it. It just seemed natural. It seemed like a good thing to do, and my parents definitely encouraged me to choose majors that would be pre-professional and would lead to a lot of job opportunities. And also growing up in the Bay Area, tech is so centric.
Mhm.
So I had a feeling I would come back out here, and it just felt natural. I guess those experiences certainly shaped my decision to apply to engineering schools.
Yeah.
And then I ended up finding a dual degree program at Penn, which I think at the time was the only one of its kind in the country where you could get a dual degree in business and engineering. Now I think there's at least a couple more around the country, but I was excited about that because it was the two things I had enjoyed, and they seemed quite pre-professional. So I ended up going to Penn in this program where you graduate in 4 years with a degree from the engineering school and a degree from Wharton undergrad.
Wow, that's absolutely insane. And yeah, like that's so impressive. Like I can't imagine having a $10,000 business by the time you graduate high school. Like that's that's insane. And I was also wondering when you were talking about your programming with like whether it be HTML or making the Xbox games, like did was programming something that came more naturally to you? Because I think my mom, she does a lot of coding in her work. She does, I think, risk management. And she tried to get me into coding and it was just not my thing. I hated every single second of it. And I was wondering for you, was there a lot of challenges when it came to learning how to do it, or was it a lot easier?
It's definitely not easy. I think there's a very interesting meta question now, which is it even worth learning? I don't know, actually. I think there's people clearly on both sides of this. I think that's a separate topic because agents can write extremely good code now. I don't know that it's worth learning. It may be.
Mhm.
But at the time, I think it's actually pretty similar to learning a foreign language. That's how I describe it to people who are considering getting into coding. Learning a foreign language is not easy, nor is coding, but it's kind of the same thing. You have to learn the vocabulary first. You have to learn what are the different building blocks and how do you type correctly? How do you spell them correctly? And then you have to learn how to piece those building blocks together, which is kind of like once you've learned how to write Spanish, can you write an essay in Spanish?
Yeah.
Takes a while to get there, but you get pretty good at it.
Mhm.
And but that's all from what feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's worth learning now, to be honest, but who knows?
Yeah. Um, and I was also wondering, I think you just touched on how you did a double major in computer science and economics at UPenn. And I was wondering if you had any particular experiences or things that you did, whether it be like interning or going into your first job at Google, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that really shaped the way you work now.
Because I'd had those experiences before college and then had chosen those as my majors, I knew pretty much from the start of college that product management was probably going to be the best career path for me. I still entertained the option of going solely into software and being an engineer. So those were my first internships. I had two internships after each of my freshman and sophomore years at Penn, and I enjoyed those. One was at Clout, which was a small startup, and then the next one was at Facebook, and I did iOS development in both. That's where, toward the end of Crystal, I had gotten experience. The iPad came out, I think, when I was a junior, maybe a sophomore, junior at Crystal, and I thought it would be cool to make an iPad app shortly after that came out. So my senior project at Crystal was an iPad app, and that was the most fun I'd had with coding was iOS development. It felt very tangible that you can have the app running on your phone that you made. So I did iOS development
Yeah.
for two internships and then did a product management internship at Google after my junior year, and I enjoyed that actually a lot more.
Hmm.
So I decided that if I'm able to go back to Google, which they ended up giving me a return offer, so it worked out, I thought this is a pretty easy decision
Hmm.
to take that. So I ended up taking that job full time, and yes, then I started in 2015 full time at Google as a product manager.
Hmm.
So it was kind of similar to what I said before, where it never felt like a conscious decision I had to make. It just felt like
Hmm.
I'm studying these two things. I'm interested in these two things. The product manager, that's how everyone described it to me. It's someone who can live in both worlds. You have a technical skill set, you have a business skill set, and you bring them both together. So it seemed natural. And it was clear to me after just, I don't know, literally a week, 2 weeks of that internship after my junior year that it was a good job for me. So it just happened naturally, I guess.
That's so cool how like everything kind of played out for you. Personally, for me in high school, I had a good amount of trial and error. Like I went in thinking I was solely interested in the sciences and biochemical research, which was something I really loved doing, and that came pretty naturally to me as well. But I also found that there are other things that I liked beyond just the sciences, and my experience at Crystal broadened my vision, I guess, if that makes sense, as to what I was interested in. But I still think it's so cool how your parents helped you get into software and entrepreneurship, and it kind of stuck with you all the way up to where you are now. And did you try anything that you found out that you didn't like, or did you just stick with the things that you knew?
I didn't dabble too much in the sense of doing projects, but my whole life growing up and then yeah, at Crystal a little bit. Definitely in college, I did a lot of projects
Mhm.
outside of class. That's where I made a couple more iPhone and iPad apps. And one of those with a friend of mine, we actually turned into a small business that we ended up selling for not very much money, but it was a great experience. But no, I never actually dabbled in doing projects in any other field. I think it was clear just from my classes at Crystal that I found, just looking at other math and science classes, I found just going from start to finish through Crystal, like in ninth grade, we had biology, in 10th grade, we had chemistry. Th Those are fine. I mean, like I found it decently interesting, but it definitely did not capture my interests the way that coding did.
Mhm.
Even it was clear to me that just pure math and physics were way more interesting and enjoyable than something like bio or biology or chemistry. So I never really considered the life sciences. Um, and then I always loved English and history. In fact, English was my favorite class, and I think in many ways the skill that I thought was the sharpest of mine. But
And I saw
um,
you won the Distinction in English Award.
I did. I'm very proud of that. That was hard. That was the hardest class I ever had at Crystal
Yeah,
was Miss Fawcett's junior English class. I believe she still teaches there.
yeah, she does. I
Um,
might have her next year, actually.
Great. She was the best teacher I had at Crystal. That was the best class I took. Crystal was by far the highest degree of difficulty. So that's why I'm very proud that that year I got the English award. Um,
Yeah.
but it was never clear to me. what career existed by being an English major. And I'm not saying that as in I don't recommend people being an English major. I just meant for myself, I didn't see the likelihood versus if I have a computer science and a business degree, there's 100 jobs that I could reasonably get.
The optionality that's present with.
So yes, it
Yeah.
seemed like a better bet, and those are still things I enjoy doing.
That's great. And I personally think that's so impressive how, as such like a hardcore like software STEM person, that you won the Distinction in English Award, which I think is probably one of the hardest classes at Crystal. That I agree. I think my junior year English class is probably one of the most challenging classes I've taken so far. And kind of moving on past, you mentioned how you worked at Google, but then afterwards you founded the new startup Shades, and also you were a capital scout at Sequoia before moving on to the role that you are now at Perplexity. Is that correct?
Yes, I joined Google 2015. I did that for 7 years as a product manager, and I worked on a couple different things, but I spent most of my time, I spent 5 years, the final five of those 7 years, working on the Discover feed, which is one of Google's really good, one of Google's two news products, Google News being the other one. And in that experience, I learned a lot about the news ecosystem, how do publishers monetize, how do advertisers monetize, how do you create content that users want to read, how do you balance between informative and entertaining. I found all of this quite interesting and linked up with two people in the end of 2022 who had just gotten something off the ground. And well, actually, they'd gotten it off the ground a fair bit earlier, but we're looking to scale it up and formalize it into a new venture. And we're looking for a third co-founder to join them. So I quit Google in November 2022 and joined with them. And we raised a round of capital and hired a small team, and we built that company for a little over 2 years.
And sorry to cut you off, but I was wondering, was it a hard decision to leave Google to pursue the startup, or did you know it was something that you wanted to do?
It was hard. It's hard to walk away from a nice compensation
Yeah.
that can support
Mhm.
day-to-day life living in the Bay Area, living in San Francisco, which I was and still am at that time, going into no income. Uh, Not everyone does that, but the market's a little different now, depending on what kind of company you start. But none of us were taking salary.
Mhm.
So going from a Google salary to nothing, while I had and have a mortgage, I bought a house in 2020, so I have a mortgage to pay. That's not an easy decision.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of financial planning, actually. I was pretty sure that, you know, uh, these were going to be great people to work with, and we love the vision. There's a big market. If done correctly, this could be a successful company at scale. But I had to do a lot of financial planning with my wife. Like, how do we sequence this out? Is this how long can we tolerate this for financially? So in some ways, the fact that it was a venture-backed, hopefully high growth startup was a good thing because it's something that either shows enough traction early to be successful, or if not, then you can just choose not to continue rather than drag it out. So that actually is what ended up happening. We had a little bit of growth, but it stalled. And after a little over 2 years, we decided there's not enough growth to justify continuing this. And we were basically reaching the end of the runway of the funds we had raised anyway. So we decided to shut it down in early 2025 last year.
I see. Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Yeah.
I know like people who have gone into startups and tried to raise capital. Sorry, this isn't my like field of expertise, so I don't know that much about it. But yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective because I feel like you see on the news all these startups that made so much money and were so successful, but at the same time, it's interesting hearing about like the logistical journey behind the entire process. And I was also wondering, even though a lot of the work you do requires an insane amount of technical skill, whether it be coding or economics, I feel like throughout the things you've described, whether it be your senior project app or starting a business or doing a startup, involves a lot of creativity behind coming up with the idea as well. And I was wondering, what is your process behind pursuing something like this?
I don't have a set process that I follow. I agree with you that there is a certain creativity to it, but I've always perceived it more as gathering ideas by talking to other people. I think actually what you're doing with interviewing people on podcast episodes is essentially the same thing. It's what we do at Perplexity. It's what I did at Google. It's what any good product manager does. Is you're constantly talking to the customers, you're talking to the users, and there is an art to the right way to ask questions. It's not like I just call up a customer and say, "Hey, what feature should I build next?" They'll have answers, but they're probably not going to be good answers. It's better to understand what they're currently doing. Let me watch you doing something. Tell me about the last time you did this. Can you pull up a previous conversation you had with Perplexity? Let's look at it. What wasn't good about it? Okay, well, how could we be better about that, right? So you could call that creativity. It's not like I'm just sitting down and thinking of ideas. So it was even the same at the time. Like the business, Grimes Photos. My dad, I think it was the summer of sixth grade,
Mhm.
he said, "This is the last summer that you're allowed to just goof around um, during the summer with your friends." And he said, "Next summer you have to work, and
Wow.
that's going to be the case until you leave the house."
Mhm.
So I had been thinking of ideas. He had been tossing out some ideas to me, and it was like it's a process. You talk to people. I got a couple odds and ends jobs, like photographing someone's car who was selling it. I photographed a graduation party, a bar mitzvah, because I had the camera skills. Um, so you talk to people, and they'll offer some ideas. You write them down, you categorize them, you figure out which ones look good. So I don't really think of that as creativity. You could call it that, but I think it's just constantly
Like,
being on the lookout for things, asking people for ideas, talking to people about what they wish were different or better. And one of those may spark something.
yeah, and kind of like what you were saying, you were finding out what you were good at and what skill set you had that not everyone has, and then taking advantage of that to start a business. Is that what you're kind of
That's
getting?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because I think one of my projects this summer, because I don't have that many plans, so I'm kind of just like side questing everywhere, is that I was thinking of starting because I'm a classical pianist and I've been doing it since I was like 4. So I decided to start a social media account where I would play pop songs on the piano. And I think the whole process, I mean, I recently just started, so yeah, it's not super successful yet, but I think like throughout the process, an interesting thing I never really thought about was like looking at the analytics of your channel and seeing like what are the most optimal times to post, process behind what type of videos get people's attention. And I don't know, that's just something that what you're saying kind of reminded me of. And kind of moving on from that, I was also wondering about your thoughts on AI because you are in the field of software and economics. And from what I'm hearing from my mom who works in finance, it's kind of impacting a lot of things if well, that's what I heard from her. I don't know if you agree or not. And I was wondering, because I saw in an interview you said how finance is a domain where it's not good enough to be 99% or even 99.9% accurate. Users need to be able to trust your data fully. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on that and talk a bit about how AI is impacting the financial world.
The presence of AI is you can see it in every industry at this point. I think that's a fair categorization. And recently, or until recently, there was a split on adoption because it's pretty expensive if you want to, or it was pretty expensive if you want to do it right. In the last few months, the I think it's become more clear that there's open source models that are much cheaper than using the latest Claude or OpenAI models, which enables lots more businesses to benefit
Mhm.
from using AI. So I think the future is definitely brighter for AI in that sense, especially in the last few months. In finance in particular, cost has not been as much of an issue because financial services firms can get really strong ROI from an investment in AI because a lot of the work that analysts do uh, can be massively automated. And this isn't in the sense that AI replaces them.
Cut you off. What does ROI stand for?
Oh, return on investment.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
for every dollar you invest, you're ideally getting much more than $1 back in um, more fees or more revenue from your customers or clients. So analysts can now work with AI to make a spreadsheet to build some financial model in 10 minutes as opposed to could take days to build these in the past. Or, if you're really good at it, maybe 5 or 6 hours, right, to build one from scratch or adapt a previous one you have. So there's really clear benefits to using AI to compose emails and do research reports on public companies and run expert interviews that can be orchestrated and conducted by AI. Um, but to your point on 99 and 99.9%, that's what we've been on the record saying is this is a field and legal is the same way or law is the same way where it's especially important to have what we call traceability or citations is another word that this is referred to with. It's crucial that your answer, the artifacts, whatever the AI produces, give you a clear trace of exactly what source documents did this come from, This is pulled from an SEC filing. This is a government document. You can see this is how the company reported their revenue for 2024 Q3. And you can trust it. It's right here. You can open the PDF and we're going to highlight the value to show you that it's correct. That's crucial because if the inputs are wrong, the output's going to be wrong.
I see. Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that. That made a lot of sense. And thank you for simplifying the language enough so someone who isn't very versed in finance or any of that could understand it pretty well.
Sure.
And sorry, I know we're going a little bit over time, but do you mind if I ask you one final question? Or
Sure.
okay, thank you. I'm sorry about the timing. I don't think I timed it
No
very.
worries.
But I have one final question that I asked to kind of everyone I talked to, which was if you could go back and tell your high school self one thing that you know today after all your experience, what would it be? And on a broader scope, do you have any advice for high school students, especially those who are interested in the fields that you pursue right now?
Anyone, almost anyone who's in high school, I think certainly almost anyone at a school like Crystal is going to have college admissions on their brain, even maybe from the start of high school. And it's from everything I understand, a nuclear arms race of who can put together the most impressive resume. And I feel like I think everyone has this experience, but if I look back at my resume, I don't know that I would have gotten into Penn if I applied today with my same resume versus
Yeah,
apply.
it's
It all
really.
just gets more and more competitive. So everyone wants an edge.
Mhm.
And what I've learned is that, and this is from lived experience, but also from being on the other side of it now at Perplexity, I do a good number of interviews. At Google, I did a lot of interviews. At Shades, we put together a team and I did a lot of interviews for that. So I've seen a lot of resumes. And probably the top learning is that it's easy, or it's relatively easy to start a project. It's pretty hard and it's pretty rare to finish a project. And I'm talking about projects outside of class, which is typically the best way that you can stand out, right? I think everyone has a pretty good GPA and
Mhm.
SATs for some school that they want to get into. But how do you differentiate yourself? It's through things you do outside the classroom. And it's kind of a dime a dozen to think of an idea and get started, especially with AI now. It's even easier. Um, you can, it can generate ideas for you and it might be able to get them started. Um, it's quite rare to see someone who actually saw it through all the way to the finish. And whatever that finish is could be defined differently depending on what the project is. Like in the example of your, playing pop songs on piano and putting it on social media, it's probably not that hard to make one video and post it, right? There's always, the editing is tricky and finding the right, how do I get the right equipment and everything, but you can figure that out and you can post one.
Mhm.
But you talked about analytics. I think that's a great thing to look at. How do I actually make this successful beyond just a couple of videos I post? Maybe success is measured in views. Maybe success is measured in I have some kind of partnership with a brand or with another creator. Maybe success is measured in I want to make $1. I don't care how, like, however I can make $1 from these videos. Maybe that's from getting monetized. Maybe it's from ads. Maybe it's from a product placement, whatever. Uh, you should choose some end goal that you think is worthy and worthwhile, and you should keep going until you hit it. And that's hard.
Mhm.
Everyone drops off. Almost everyone drops off halfway to that goal. And the last 10% is usually the part that takes longer than the previous 90%. It's the last mile of delivery is really hard, and it requires you to wear a bunch of different hats
Mhm.
in software equivalent. You see college students who they'll put on their resume, oh, I went to 16 hackathons this year and I made 16
But
projects,
no
and
impact
we
on.
don't really care. We look at that resume, we don't really care. We'd rather see that they spent all of that time on one thing, even if that didn't become some venture scale, hundreds of thousands of users. I don't care if you had 10 users, but if you can show me that you actually took it from start to finish, you made something that you deemed a finished product and that definition was solid. You had to do the last mile of delivery. That's more impressive to us, and that's what we consider a builder. And builder doesn't have to be just in software, right? What you're doing, you're building a social media account with your piano talent. So that's my advice
Mhm.
to anyone. This isn't just to a high school student. It's to my past self. It's to my current self. It's to anyone. But I think it's especially applicable for high school students thinking about how to get into college.
Because right now I've talked about this with so many guests and so many because I did this like organization at my school where we tackle issues in the student body, whether it be like career development, AI literacy, or academic pressure from a student lens. And I was able to talk with a lot of administration as well as many different students about these topics. And one thing that came up was how people were doing things just to put it on their resume. And some of the previous guests I've talked to have said how it's really easy to tell how when someone's pursuing or like stepping into a leadership role because they want the title, not because they actually care about like what they want to achieve or what goals they want to set. Where if someone genuinely cares, they'll be able to see the project from start to finish. But do you think, as someone who's had so much experience, can you easily differentiate between genuine like passion and wanting to finish it versus just like a more superficial lens of having it as like a resume padding?
This maybe isn't the answer you expect, but if someone saw a project to completion and did it extremely well, I don't care if they find it fascinating or if they find it boring,
Yeah.
but if they saw it to completion, that shows that they have a level of
Yeah.
grit that is a really good indicator of success. And in many ways, a lot of the stuff that anyone will do at work is not necessarily going to be interesting to them.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for just rolling up your sleeves and doing the work.
Mhm.
And I think it can actually be an anti-pattern of success if you require that something be interesting in order to work on it when you're in the workplace. I think it's more open-ended if you're in high school, think about, oh, I can do any project outside of class. What do I choose? Sure, of course, it's going to be better to choose something that you're interested in, of course,
You'll
all else equal.
yeah.
But in the workplace, you get assigned work typically, and you're not going to be a very respected employee if you go, oh, I don't know, that doesn't sound very interesting to me, right? You still have to do it. It
Mhm.
might be really mundane.
Yeah.
It might be, oh, you have to look at 1,000 of these things and label them, right? And that's not necessarily going to be fun, but you just got to do it.
It's definitely building the endurance as a high schooler. Like, for example, I did some organic chemistry research in a lab the past few years, and it's so mundane. Like you see the finished product on a poster or presentation, it looks so cool, but like the hours of once I had to like sit down and just spend 9 hours swapping stuff out of a machine and writing down the numbers. And it's just stuff like that, that what you're saying, like it's like kind of productive struggle being able to work through things that aren't necessarily easy. Back to what you were saying, I think when it came, when I what I was talking about in terms of social, you see like high schoolers founding these organizations where they say they tackle educating kids in STEM, and then all they do is essentially post a few videos on social media or like run one workshop without really having significant impact. So I think what you're saying is completely valid. And you were saying how you see it from start to finish and set a goal for yourself. So I guess there's a kind of correlation there in between actually finishing a project and putting in the effort to care about it, whether you genuinely care about it or not, like you're saying. Yeah.
That's right.
Mm.
One of my favorite nonfiction books is Open. It's Andre Agassi's autobiography. And surprisingly to me, I've always liked watching tennis and playing tennis. Uh, Andre Agassi hates tennis,
Mhm.
like really hates it. And he's one of the greatest of all time who's played tennis.
Oh, wow.
Um, we're so used to hearing the counter anecdote, right? Kobe Bryant, who's like, I love basketball so deeply that I don't care when I have to shoot 500 free throws in a row. I love every shot. I love the craft and the perfection. And Andre Agassi's dad made him learn tennis. He hated it. He resisted it. And but he grew to love the fact that he had a gift at something.
Mhm.
Uh, not a gift that was given to him, he earned it, but the fact that he was able to do something at such a high level, there was a certain type of enjoyment in the purity of that, even though he actually hates playing tennis. That's a
Wait,
pretty interesting example, similar to what I'm saying.
yeah. I see what you mean. It kind of applies with this podcast. Like I set myself a goal to have 25 episodes done by the end of the summer. And okay, I kind of hate doing this. Like I hate talking to strangers. I hate editing videos and listening to myself talk. And I hate like cold emailing people. But I think it's just like the process, like you were saying, of being able to do it, even though there's a certain level of discomfort or
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and I really enjoyed your answer to my final question. I think it's probably one of the more interesting answers I've gotten. I thought that was super cool. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Grimes, for taking the time to speak with me today. I really learned. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Jeff Grimes. A huge thank you to Mr. Grimes for taking the time to speak with me today, and thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you guys next time.